a new analysis came out that, in fact, the program was operating within budget, regardless of LL or MM passing.
Excuse me while I do this. What?
If legislators knew that they now had enough money, some might think that they would say, oh, okay, we no longer need these props LL and MM because the program is operating within budget. Instead, they even tacked on more because of the changes made to SNAP.
Did they know this before the election? And did they keep it quiet before the election and then tell the JBC about it afterwards?
There would have been more plausible deniability had it not been for that amendment added to MM.
So we voted to give kids free lunch. Did we need to do it? We'll find out. But first, subscribe and like our channel. Click that little bell icon for notifications and find the Devil's Advocate podcast on your favorite listening app. Nash Herman from Independence Institute, you're the guy who warned us about LL and MM, free lunches for the kids, and the past. And now you're saying maybe it wasn't necessary. So the obvious question is, why do you hate children?
Well, I actually love children, and I hope to have some in a few years.
You can buy them now.
That's, yeah.
I mean, it's just eBay. Everything is on eBay. When we talked about this last time, you said LL and MM, not a good idea. It passed by a wild margin. Did it pass by more than what the originals did?
It did. And if you remember, you actually made a prediction that you did think that it was going to pass, but you thought it was going to be less than the initial Prop FF. Prop FF passed 56-43-ish, and then that was the first time.
Right.
Prop LL, that was the revenue retention measure, passed by 2/3, 66-33. Then, of course, the one which was actually increasing revenue was a bit closer, or 60-40.
But still, 60-40. Mm-hmm. I was wrong about this, and it bothers me because I feel that this is just putting your toe in the water, the socialist toe in your water of class envy. Let's get something from rich people and give things to just slightly less rich people. This wasn't means tested. This wasn't for poor people. It was buy my kid lunch. You do it, not me. And I really thought more people would get that after they saw just how ridiculous this program was, how it went over budget, how just morally bankrupt the whole thing is. And it doesn't give me a lot of faith for the future. Talk to me about what you just found. Now remember, we needed to pass this because they didn't have the money to keep the plan going. There was no money, I tell you, Mr. Herman, there was no money. We had no choice.
Exactly. That's how propositions LL and MM were sold to voters. There are two parts of that. One was that kids would starve without it, and two, that it was under budget. Before they even passed.
You mean they ran out of money?
Exactly. Right. Yeah, within the first year, they're projecting a major $60 million shortfall. Now,
out of like a $120 million program?
100, yeah.
So it was like 60% over budget. So let's get to of course they're going to starve because kids always starve. Before every tax election, Colorado turns into a field of starving children. But the idea was we don't have the money to pay for it. So if we don't want these kids to starve, you got to pay more. You put out an analysis saying, not so fast. What did you find?
Well, an important thing I want to mention before we get to that even is before Props LL and MM even passed, we knew that kids were not going to starve. You know, we're in Colorado in 2025, richest nation in the world, in history. We're not going to let kids starve. And the legislators knew that. They set up a contingency to roll back the program if LL and MM failed at the ballot.
And by the way, before LL and MM, we had a free school lunch program. Mm-hmm. It was means tested. If you can't afford lunch, we'll give you a lunch.
Exactly.
Just tell us you can't afford it.
Right.
And maybe we could have increased that level, saying, well, no, it's this. Mm-hmm. But yeah, nobody was starving.
Exactly. So that was the first false premise that they were using to sell this. Right. I saw a ton of ads saying don't let kids starve kind of thing. So anyway, then last month I was listening to the Joint Budget Committee. That's my job, to listen to the budget writers, meet with all the different departments of the state to determine, budget requests, where they might need a cut budget. And I was listening to the Department of Education, and they were going over the Healthy School Meals for All program. And a new analysis came out that, in fact, the program was operating within budget, regardless of LL or MM passing.
Excuse me while I do this. What? Did they know this? It was in budget, even though they said it was out of budget.
And so that's where there's always some room for plausible deniability, right? In the summer, there was the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
On the federal level.
On the federal level, correct. And that clarified existing deductions for taxes, because the state has a rolling conformity. We follow federal tax policy. And so that actually clarified that although there's all this catastrophizing about running out of money for this program, no, actually, the program was operating within budget. So,
explain to me how the One Big Beautiful Bill and the school lunch program, why does that have something to do with this?
Because of who is taxed and how they're taxed, the Healthy School Meals for All program taxes individuals earning over $300,000 by capping their deductions, their income tax deductions.
On the state level?
On the state, yes. Right. So then that was going to be continued. That was clarified that, okay, these tax cuts were going to continue to exist with the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Okay, so you needed the Trump bill to say, here are the deductions, so that Colorado can say, you're not taking those deductions on the state form.
Exactly.
And that's how we're going to get the money out of you. So we're not going to call it a tax increase on the wealthy. We're just going to change your deductions so you pay more. All right. So that got clarified, and what does that mean?
Well, so then obviously there are several unknowns, complications around the Big Beautiful Bill.
Right.
So that's why they called the special session to hash some of that out. And that's when they actually added an amendment to Proposition MM. So that's the one that was increasing revenue for the program, which quietly added at the very end of the ballot language to send additional funding to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which is also, most people know as food stamps. So that's kind of what changed during the special session. That's where it's like, okay, well, if legislators knew that they now had enough money, some might think that they would say, oh, okay, we no longer need these props LL and MM because the program is operating within budget. Instead, they even tacked on more because of the changes made to SNAP from the...
So this smells really bad. Let me kick it back to you and see if I'm following you. Maybe some people knew that before the election, hey, we don't need LL and MM for the free lunch program. We're looking at this, no, we're going to have enough money. However, if we're going to have more than enough money and we're going to raise revenues, raise taxes, why don't we find a way to spend that? So whatever we don't spend on free lunches for kids, we're going to give to food stamps over here. But that's not what they said. The ballot language did not say, shall we tax rich people to pay for more food stamps in Colorado? That's a fine question to ask. That's not what they asked. They said, shall we tax rich people who are richer than me, and say that money is going to go for your starving kid, but it's not going to your kid, it's going to somebody else.
And that's the crazy thing about this all, with this analysis, was Proposition MM. So the controversy of that alone, but then the fact that, okay, now that they have this additional funding for SNAP, over 50% is now, they're not saying it will necessarily, but it's available to go to SNAP.
Over 50% of what?
Of the new collected funds, the new $95 million for MM.
So we could have cut the MM tax increase by half, and it wouldn't have changed. So let me ask you the $150 million question. Did they know this before the election? And did they keep it quiet before the election and then tell the JBC about it afterwards?
Right. There's always speculation there.
You speculate for me.
Well, Corey Gaines, he does the Colorado Accountability Project. He just came out with an article where he actually asked some legislative council staff members, hey, how essentially what you're asking.
Right.
And there's always, that's the business of forecasting in economics and analysis, is that it is very difficult to predict stuff. However, that leads to a bigger question of, well, if analysts can get it so wrong, economists can get it so wrong, and they're all called experts, we're all called experts, and we can all disagree, it leads me to go to the free market rather than just a few people making these very real decisions that impact everyday Coloradans.
So that was almost a politician-like dodge of my question. I'm very proud of you. That was good. Tell me, do you think they knew this before the election? Do you think that economists in the state understood, wait a second, we don't need this now? And do you think some legislators might have known that? And I'm not going to hold you to it.
I'll answer. Like I said, there would have been more plausible deniability had it not been for that amendment added to MM, in which they added all that additional funding to go to SNAP. That's where it becomes more okay.
Man, you are dead on that. The idea of like, wait a second, we might not need this tax increase. Well, we got to do something with the extra money. Well, let's buy more food stamps for people.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And we tag it on at the end as an amendment before the final vote in the legislature in the special session. And this is why we don't like our politicians, because they're conniving, lying people who just want at our money. And this is a perfect example. And now it's out in the open thanks to your listening in, making it public. I'd like to see more outrage about it, but I think we've become numb to this.
Yeah, well, our director of policy at Independence Institute tweeted about my analysis, and that did get a lot of traction on X, for what that's worth. It kind of went Colorado viral.
Colorado viral.
Nothing crazy, but there was traction on
Colorado viral, that's like Minnesota good looking. Yeah, you're a 10 in Minnesota. In California, you're a 6.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, nothing. You would have expected a lot more from media, I would have thought.
You would, but I'm just disappointed. We were sold a false bill of goods. Now comes the proof we were sold a false bill of goods, plus circumstantial evidence that, look, they knew this wasn't necessary. That's why they put this amendment in to catch all the extra money and not send it back. Let's debruce it to make sure we get to keep it, and it's a thing. All right. People should be just pissed. Let's move it to next year. I think both you and I suspect this is just a test run of screwing people who have more money than the voter does. I don't think this would have flown. There's talk of a progressive income tax on the ballot next year. Independence Institute was crucial back in the mid-'80s, getting rid of our progressive, some call it a graduated income tax, for our flat tax. Let me tell you the story about this for a second. Barry Paulson, economist who was working with the legislature and worked for II during that time, said if you want a revenue-neutral flat tax to replace the graduated progressive income tax that Colorado had in the 80s, that tax number, the magic rate, should be 4.5%. If it's 4.5%, you'll bring in what you're bringing in now. So the legislature did change it to a flat income tax, but at 5%, so they could have a massive tax windfall, which they did. And I think the flat tax, which was later then codified into the Constitution by the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, has been a boom for Colorado. And after the Owens administration helped get it down to 4.63, and then we put on a couple ballot initiatives to bring it down to 4.4%, we're finally where it should have been. How successful has the flat income tax been in Colorado? How would you even measure it?
It's been crucial, I'd say, to our lasting economic growth and appeal to the state.
Why?
It's about, you want to talk about fairness. It's fair. What I earn is taxed at the same rate as what my neighbor earns and what my boss earns and everyone else around me. It's the epitome of fairness in my eyes.
We all pay something, although it's not actually a flat tax. And this one, it's like, well, duh, makes sense. But you have to kind of go through the steps because of all the major deductions and standardized deductions that people get on the lower end of the scale as a percentage of your income. You're paying far less than 4.4%. Right. And people on the higher end are paying a lot more. So it's actually a progressive income tax in practice because of the deductions.
Exactly. Well, and that's a common sleight of hand that is used to argue against it, is that people will say Colorado's tax system is regressive, which, that means as a percentage of my income, lower income people will end up paying more because, a smaller amount of income, every dollar is all that more significant. And it is true that our overall tax code is regressive. However, that is not the state tax. The state income tax, as you just mentioned,
is actually progressive.
It's actually the only progressive. All the others, the state, the sales and use, the severance tax, cigarettes, alcohol, property taxes, those are all regressive. Those all punish lower income people more. The state flat income tax is the only one, as you said, that is progressive. So it already is the best tax we pay.
That's fascinating. It's hard to put it on a bumper sticker, because tax those rich SOBs fits on a bumper sticker. But to say, wait a second, the state sales tax as a percentage of your income hurts poorer people more. The property taxes, you pay it in your rent, you pay it in your homes, as a percentage of your income is a lot more for poorer people than for richer people. The only where that is flipped is that because you get your federal standardized deduction and you get earned income tax credits on the poor end, that your first $40,000, $50,000, you pay no state income tax on. So if you're making 45 grand a year or 60 grand a year, you're paying a smaller percentage of your total thing in this flat income tax than the guy who's making 300 grand.
Exactly.
So it is the only progressive tax, but they say it's regressive because they lie.
Yep.
Because they lie. Coloradans love Tabor. A recent poll out just shows again how much people love the idea of tax limitation and the idea of being asked before you raise taxes. Part of Tabor is that we have a flat tax. So I think we're getting closer and closer to this battle between a flat tax and a graduated progressive income tax. If LL and MM and FF before that were any indication, people should love this progressive graduated income tax because the image is we're gonna get those rich guys. Do you get the rich guys?
You do get the rich guys, that's for sure. The recent ituration, the newest iteration of this progressive tax, it's Initiative 181, is expected to increase revenue by $4.1 billion. Detabored.
$4.1 billion is a massive tax increase. I mean, our general fund is what?
50.
No, well, the whole budget's it's like $15 billion.
I think even up to 18 now.
So it's 18.
Yeah.
So we're gonna grow it by 20 to 25% with this.
That's another, again, there's so many buzzwords and slogans and euphemisms, and that's another one I've been seeing recently, and I wrote an article on recently, is this austerity idea, that Colorado's living in this austerity agenda, and we don't have the money to do anything, and it's like, okay, well, the state budget per the governor's proposal is still increasing the budget by almost 6%. So that's the opposite of austerity, by definition. it's the opposite of austerity if you're increasing spending. So
I like looking at the states that they're trying to emulate. I think we ought to emulate Texas and Florida and Wyoming and other states that have no income tax. I think that draws productive people, it draws businesses in. I look at New York and California, who are losing hundreds of thousands of people and so many of their businesses because of their progressive graduated income tax. There's two ways to do the modeling. You do the modeling in a static model, which is, all these billionaires are just going to keep their residences here in Colorado instead of moving, half the year plus one day to their nicer place in Florida. And then there's a dynamic model that says, wait a second, people don't just stick around to get money taken from them. They will go someplace where they're valued. And that's what's happening in California and New York. So I think about this projection that it's going to bring in $4 billion. I don't buy it. Do you?
I do not. Well, and that's the thing when we talk about, look at California and New York. You also have to remember that Colorado not that long ago was a flyover state. California, They have Silicon Valley, they have Hollywood. For what these things are worth, it's one of the most beautiful places on earth. There's a lot extra that comes with California that it might have, be enough for those wealthier people to say, all right, it sucks, the regulations, the taxes suck, but it's California. Versus Colorado, we're really biting the hand that feeds us. It's showing the hubris of our legislators to really say, like...
You think about whether it's Tesla, whether it's Chevron, whether it's so many investment firms that are leaving the state of California, most of them going to someplace in Texas, which is welcoming and has a secure tax system. They know it's not going to sneak up. You can go ahead and raise the 0% income tax by 10%, and it's still zero. And that's what Colorado has been since the passage of Tabor and since our flat tax. If we get rid of this, Colorado's economic sustainability is in question.
Oh yeah, and I've written several articles on this. People can see them at Complete Colorado or thinkfreedom.org. But the state demography office recently just had their summit where they go over population, migration, all this stuff. And we are starting to see that point. We're reaching that tipping point where domestic migration into Colorado has all but collapsed.
That is amazing because as a guy who's been here nearly all my life, we've seen the growth spurts, and they come and they come and they come, and the Californians come and they come and come. No mas. They're not coming anymore. And I think it's because of the price of living in Colorado. The home prices are artificially high because of growth control. It's hard to get services done because our minimum wage and Family Leave Act and all these other things and regulations are making anything expensive. And our power bills are just starting to go through the roof, and they've got a lot farther to go in the next decade or so. People are going, I can't do business here. Young people are saying, I can't buy a house here. I'll go someplace where I can buy a house. With this new tax code, let me play devil's advocate. Yeah, but they're going to lower taxes for a lot of us. It's just going to be the rich guys. So we're all going to get a tax cut. Look, you'll get a tax cut. Everybody loves a tax cut. But those wealthy people will just stick it to them.
Yeah.
So that tax cut will bring in more lower income folks, more people, middle income people. It's going to ignite the state because of that.
That is wishful thinking, in my opinion.
Why?
That's another article I wrote recently again. Colorado is continuously sliding in our tax competitiveness rankings, according to the Tax Foundation, which is a nonprofit think tank that does tax policy nationally. Colorado, the last several years, has been slipping and sliding down that tax competitiveness. And again, when it's juxtaposed with Texas and Florida and Wyoming, even lower income people, I'd rather pay no tax than just a tax cut. You know.
There is this battle going on between states, and it's a great battle. And we've got 50 laboratories, and more of them are getting on the bandwagon that independence has been on for years, and we brought the taxes down to 4.4%. And they're like, no, we can beat you. No, we can beat you. I forget if it's North Carolina now is the latest saying, no, we're going to bring it down to this. And every state is fighting, competing for a lower income tax or no income tax to draw business to their state. It is insane. It is economic suicide that we would go in the opposite direction.
Exactly. Yeah, with that tax competitiveness rankings, the most recent edition, they said, well, it's not that Colorado necessarily implemented a whole lot of bad tax policy this year. It's just that every other state is doing so much more.
Really?
It is, yeah.
So
exactly what you were saying, just lowering that fight to lower the income tax. Now there's, you can debate the merits of getting rid of property tax, which some states are also considering, which would be difficult. But there's a lot of creativity right now, a lot of excitement from a lot of other states. And yeah, Colorado, we could be left in the dust.
We will be. So there was for a long time, we were always in the top 3 states for business, for growth, for business attractiveness, because we had solid regulations, we had a beautiful state, we had seasons, we had an educated workforce, and we had tax certainty that Tabor gives us. So when some company comes here and they go, our people are going to get taxed this way, the business is going to get taxed this way, and we can rely on it. And it's not going to go up without a vote of the people. And I know businessmen who are eyeballing leaving the state.
I'll add to that. I just went to the University of Colorado. They have their Leeds School of Economic Outlook every year, and I attended this year. And aside from, again, some of the uncertainty around the federal shutdown and some of that uncertainty with lack of data, that was a big concern. But the other most cited concern I heard was regulations.
Really?
Yeah, that was by far the most I heard from
Now, this
businesses.
has been a bell that we've been ringing at Independence for the better part of a decade, that the unsung story is the growth of the regulatory state. The Denver Gazette has done just an incredible job over the last few weeks of detailing what has happened, and it's making Colorado's fiscal situation so uncertain. There are several ways to tax. Yeah, you tax them. You made that, we do it. The other one is you regulate them, which means you do the things that we want you to do. That means you lose money, but we get the benefit. That's a tax. And then, of course, on the federal level, we devalue the money every year with inflation. So the money you earn, we just tax that away just because we make it worthless over time. These are terrible, terrible things, but Colorado has voted for the people who put in the regulations. And other than the Gazette recently, I don't see the media zeroing in on the cost of putting oil and gas out of business, of what they've done to ranchers and farmers and agriculture and mining, that the regulations around building and energy, it's pricing the state out.
It is, certainly.
Give me a prediction here. If the progressives want to put this progressive tax, they keep calling it a graduated tax, on the ballot, I think it's very attractive to voters because it looks like a tax cut to you, and there's this sense of screw the rich guy. And I feel that class baiting is growing faster and faster. I think this initiative would fail, but I think it would do better than I would like. The same way on my prediction with LL and MM, we're off in the wrong direction.
I think it's about getting the voter educated because based on how it's currently written, there's serious question about if that most popular part of Tabor, which is consentively governed, if that will still be around if this is passed. And I think if enough people...
Why wouldn't it be around?
It's something, I'm not a lawyer, but it's essentially, as it is written, it appears as though it's moving tax policy from the Constitution to the statutes. And if that's the case, that's in the hands of the legislature. And that means they can increase taxes at their whimsy. And so that's the most popular, I would think, part of Tabor. People love, just having a direct say in their taxes. And so if people know that, I think it'll be like Proposition HH from a couple of years ago, where they said sacrifice your Tabor for lower property taxes, and people caught on and said, hell no, we are not doing that. So
by 60 to 40%, they said that.
And so I think, if we can get there.
It's funny, we leave it at this, but for us old dogs, we've been through this. And during the 70s, we watched the legislature vote for more tax increases. Republican legislators voting for more taxes. And then came a tax revolt. We saw it in California with Prop 13. And then in Colorado, we had a couple tries at Tabor. It scared the legislature, and they passed something called the Byrd-Arbuscal Amendment, which was a spending limitation. That was great, but it didn't stop Tabor from coming. And it was the smugness of the legislature just continuing to grow the size of government without consent of the government, without that vote that made Byrd-Arbuscal, that made Tabor happen. And now we're going to go back to that. We had a progressive income tax, which was not unleashing the power of the economy. A Democratic governor signed the flat income tax into being here in Colorado. And now we want to get rid of that. It's almost like we didn't learn our lesson, or that everybody who learned the lesson is too old and nobody wants to listen to a bunch of old guys like me.
That very well could be the case.
Well, I know it's the case with you.
Yeah.
People want to learn more about what you do and about this, because it isn't easy. Where do they go?
Thinkfreedom.org, and fiscal policy page is where I tend to publish most of my things. Okay. Or Complete Colorado, I also publish there.
And look for Nash Herman.
Yeah.
Give me your prediction. Does it pass if this thing gets on the ballot?
I think, again, it's with the caveat that if people understand truly what's at stake, it will not.
That you're giving up Tabor, and you're putting the power of future tax increases from you, the voter, to them, the politicians.
Right.
Who wouldn't vote for that? Nash, thanks so much. Great work.
Thank you.
And you, Think Freedom.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.